Welcome to Industrial Problem Solving. My name is Dave Royson. I am super excited to finish our mini-series on web inspection. No series on inspection would be complete without a mention on how to complain. Yes, we do it all the time. But do we do it well? Let's see. Our motivations for learning about complaints are many and compelling. First, complaints are quite common, perhaps in the 0.5 to 5% range for many commodity products. However, I've seen as little as 7 sigma for beer cans and pharmaceutical products, which is such a small number you will need a scientific calculator to figure it out. I've also seen complaint rates higher than 25%, where there was but a single supplier for a material and the customer had thus little or no commercial leverage. No matter how common, though, complaints take an outsized portion of our attention, as they well should. Second, customer returns are the most expensive product you will make. Not only do you invest all of your time and materials and labor into a role which is entirely lost, you may also have to pay for shipping coming and going. However, returns can be much more costly than that. You could lose a customer without any notice. The reason is that customer complaints are the tip of the iceberg. While you may think they complain too much, they are actually more unhappy than you know and take a lot of trouble without saying a thing. Now, that is not to say that their unhappiness is due to any design or quality fault on your part as a supplier. It may be all, none, or some of your fault. That will be separate problem-solving steps to find out the mechanics and politics of a problem. See earlier clips in the Web401 series on how to do problem solving. So all of this can be quite confusing. In many, if not most cases, neither the supplier nor the customer fully understands the problem. Our complaint should use standard language when it is available. The must-have Rollin Web Defect Encyclopedia lists proper names and common aliases for some 500 defects. It also includes pictures, causes, and cures, and much more. However, if you should be so innovative as to invent a new trouble never seen before, give it a name, picture, and write-up similar to the format of this reference. When you complain is your business, but as soon as possible is usually best. Your complaint should focus on where the problem is first seen, as well as where it causes the most troubles. This first seen focus will be helpful for troubleshooting. Your complaint will always involve economic considerations. Perhaps it is to recover the raw material costs of defective materials. Perhaps it is to put your supplier on notice in the hope or expectation that they will troubleshoot and fix the cause. However, the how is the focus of this clip. That is, when we've decided we have had enough, how do we document the problem so that we maximize the chances of getting paid for the return, or even better yet, avoiding future problems like that? Here is the minimum complaint information that you should provide to your supplier. It includes a defect name, which should be a standard name if known. It includes a photocopy of your supplier's roll ID label. Best practices are that the shipping label is either put back on the outside of the roll or inside the core. The defect information should also include the machine it ran on and a detailed description of the troubles. The location would include both CD information, MD information, and frequency. Of course, a picture is worth 1,000 words. However, a sample is even worth more, especially if care is taken, as we describe in the next slide. There is an art and craft and skill to preserving a sample that will greatly increase its utility for communication and troubleshooting. Here we show a defect sample shown in dark green, taken from a much larger roll. We will cut it out neatly and cut the sample square with the web's edges. We will circle the defect and label the sample with both roll ID number as well as location in the roll. We should try and avoid folding the samples if at all possible, especially if the defect is related to flatness or wrinkling. If the sample is too big to fit in a mailing envelope, roll the sample around a large diameter tube. Of course, the envelope is carefully padded and mailed to the customer service agent at the supplier's plant. Call or email them to let them know that a return is being mailed. Follow up a few days later. Often, a sample will not show a defect, especially if it is a roll defect like corrugations, starring, telescoping, and so on. In those cases, we might carefully pack the entire roll and return it to the supplier. Make a photocopy of the supplier's shipping label and include that label with the roll. Again, handle and package that roll with great care. You and your supplier will learn more from failures than from successes, so treat that returned roll with white gloves. It is the most valuable roll on that truck. The web world is quite large, so it would be difficult to list what documentation might be helpful for troubleshooting. Certainly, web handling parameters such as tension, nip, speed, temperature, and so on at the location of the troubles would be essential. Beyond that, coders, printers, laminators, and just about every other process will have their own essential process parameters. Most of these are recorded on grade setup instructions. In the case of customer complaints, one should always try to start there. Indeed, I have refused some assignments to help with customer complaints until either I could talk to the customer service rep directly, or much better yet, to the customer himself. However, even for internal waste, it might be a good idea to start with the customers. Otherwise, you might reject too tightly or too loosely or on the wrong things. Consider the typical chain of communication. Here, the customer's operator has difficulty running. Whether it is due to man, machine, or material is not relevant at this time. They can blame your raw material, and whether it has a design or quality fault in no way changes the beginning of this process. After a long enough struggle, the operator complains to the engineer or to the supervisor that they are having trouble with this new role. If the complaints come often enough, the engineer complains to the purchasing manager, who may complain to the plant manager. She, in turn, complains to your plant manager, who complains to QA, who complains to the engineer, who complains to the operator and says, "What's up?" We recall the childhood party game called telephone and how quickly messages get garbled. A much better, and perhaps the only safe and effective route, is for the operator of your machine go to the operator of the customer's machine and ask, "What's up?" Engineers from both plants should also talk directly because many problems are technical. Of course, we should also keep management apprised because they may need to then follow up on what the problem really is and what the options are. I teach this sequence in both my baggy web troubleshooting series and my industrial problem solving classes. That is, how to complain if the problem from your suppliers is chronic, meaning common, and serious, meaning the economic consequences are notable. On the first occurrence, you would complain. Of course, the supplier will pay the claim, but of course they will seldom fix the problem. That is because the problem has probably been with them since day one, and it is not easily solved. Of course, the problem will come again. On the second occurrence, you will complain, but you will also try to find a trustworthy quantitative measure that both you and your supplier might be able to do. In the cases of baggy web specifically, roll hardness variation sometimes works, and the strip test almost always works, except for webs having extremes of modulus, such as tissue or foil. Of course, the customer will pay the claim, but of course, they will seldom fix the problem. That is because the problem has probably been with them since day one, and it is not easily solved, as in the case of bagginess, as we just described as one example. On the third occurrence, you will send the entire truckload back. That is required to catch their attention. But you will have to have a second qualified supplier already in the supply chain. If you don't already have a second qualified supplier, you can expect to suffer from most problems forever. If you are uncomfortable with this sequence, or it is above your pay grade, you can also expect to suffer from most problems forever. Yes, chronic and persistent problems are difficult, but they are not necessarily impossible. They just require more time and talent than you've previously applied to have any reasonable expectation of improvement. Even problems such as bagginess, one of the hardest in our industry to figure out and fix, can be figured out and fixed. See my Web 201.45a through R clip to see dozens of successful case histories. If bagginess can sometimes be fixed, so too can other difficult problems, but only if you go to school to see what others have tried and learned, and then putting in more time and talent than your plant has ever done before. Thank you so very much for joining me in this problem solving and problem preventing series based on web and roll inspection. This sixth clip in this series concludes the subject, for now at least. Let me know if you have any questions or if you have any subject that you would like to hear about. If you found anything interesting or useful here, please like and share. Also, please consider the supporting of this channel using the Patreon link below. Patreons are given special thank you gifts ranging from email help to a signed copy of my latest book, the must-have 500-page Web Handling Handbook. See you next time.